more people than most people realize do recover from severe mental illnesses. I happen to be one of them. I've been off the lithium for over 30 years. I haven't had to take anything else. I'm as normal or crazy as anybody else.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Marcia Naomi Berger, and we're going to be talking about her new book, The Bipolar Therapist, and how at 29 years old she found herself struggling with bipolar disorder and the ensuing hospitalizations and eventual treatment and cure for this condition. And she's been off of all medications for over 30 years and is still a practicing psychotherapist. It's a fascinating story. She's incredibly insightful, incredibly honest. Not only do we talk about that journey of hers dealing with bipolar disorder, but we actually talk a little bit about therapy itself, and in particular, couples therapy. It was not something I expected to get into in this, but it sort of segued into that kind of toward the end. But I really enjoyed talking to her, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this. This is Marcia Naomi Berger. Marcia Berger is here, Northern California. I'm in Southern California. It's hot today for both of us, temperature-wise. And we're going to talk about, what a story you have. And her book, it's The Bipolar Therapist, right? Isn't that the title?
The Bipolar Therapist by Marcia Naomi Berger.
And we got her middle name in there, which is a beautiful, beautiful name, Naomi. So is Marcia, and so is Berger. So, when I got the information about you, I was like, this is unbelievable because, you hear about people that suffer from bipolar and other, mental health issues. But now we have a therapist who studies this stuff, knows about it, and still has, it doesn't make you immune to some of the things that other people have to go through. How did this happen? You were very young when this happened, right? You were in your 20s when you went. What's going on? Let's talk about maybe if there's a family history and what was the onset like? What were the symptoms? I mean, there's so much here.
I was in my very late 20s. I was almost 30 when I had my first manic episode, and it was called, the disease or disorder was called manic depression back then. This was 1974 when I had my first manic episode. And it did land me in a hospital. It was a horrible snake pit. And before then, I was doing just fine. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist. I was working in an alcoholism treatment center where I was respected by my colleagues and doing some clinical supervision. I had become an expert working with families and couples, especially. And I loved my work, and I liked the whole atmosphere. And then I went to New York. I was living in California and working in the San Francisco in an alcoholism treatment center. And my sister was about to get married, and that was in New York. And I flew to New York to the wedding. And on the way to New York, we stopped in Chicago, and I was wandering around the airport during I think it's called the layover, where they stop and then you get on the plane again to continue. So I'm wandering around the halls in this airport in Chicago, and I believe that I can heal people. And just by looking at them, I kind of beamed my eyes at them, and I could sense everybody needed healing. And here I was with this power to heal people. So I was doing that, and somehow I made it back on the plane in time. And when I got to New York, I began decompensating, it's called, although people might not have known it at the time. I was staying at my mother's house, and I went to the beach. It's in Rockaway, New York, and walking up and down the beach, also feeling like I had this special powers and could connect with certain people, and went back to the house and didn't sleep for a couple of nights. I was at my mother's house, and then I had this my mind kept racing. I was feeling very high and having all kinds of insights, and I was also having some delusions, including that my therapist, who had told me recently that he was divorcing or got divorced, and I had this fantasy that he and I were going to get married, that he was in love with me. And I remember telling my mother that I was going to get married, and she said something like, "Oh, that's wonderful." Anyway, it went on and on. But by the time I was supposed to go to the wedding, I was really very irritated with my mother. I thought she was intruding on me way too much. And I ran out into the street screaming, and I was taken to a snake pit hospital in Queens, New York, where I was very heavily doped. It was horrible. All the patients there practically were doped so much that we'd be like just walking around as though we were in a trance or like zombies. And fortunately, I got out after 8 days, and I was transferred to a very nice rehab facility where I stayed for a couple of weeks, and they got me off the awful medicine. And then I went back to work. So that was how it started.
So when this happened, you're at the airport, there was no indications prior to that? It just came out of nowhere?
If you read The Bipolar Therapist, the very first chapter is about an anger workshop that we had for staff at the Alcoholism Treatment Center where I worked. And something very interesting and unexpected happened during that anger workshop. I got in touch with some anger. Back then, they don't do this anymore because it proved to be not such a not a useful thing to do and often destructive. But back in the 70s, it was very popular in therapy circles to bang on pillows or beat punching bags and get rid of your anger that way. Anyway, I had so much that I ended up, I was given stronger things than pillows. I was given, somebody took off a shoe and had me throw it on the floor, and it broke the heel off. And then there was an old chair, and that, so I really got in touch with it. Did that precipitate my situation, the manic episode? I don't know. But that did happen a few days before I went to New York for the wedding.
But other than that, it just kind of came out of nowhere. Is there any history in your family?
I do have an uncle who, it turned out, was diagnosed. Back then it was called manic depression, as I mentioned. And he had manic episodes also. I'm not sure whether he also had depressed episodes.
My understanding of it is that the manic episodes, there's kind of a high to them.
Oh, it's very high. You feel wonderful when you're having them. On top of the world.
Yeah, and then there's a crash and you're super depressed.
It depends on the person, because there are two types of bipolar. What they call bipolar 1 is more manic and maybe not depression or not so much. And then type 2 is more of the alternating between the manic and the depression.
So this happened, I think I was reading 2 or 3 times with hospitalizations. Is that correct?
There were 3 hospitalizations within a year and a half. I didn't believe that there was anything wrong with me. I thought it was stress that was causing me to have these, quote, breakdowns. And I was told on the second hospitalization I should take lithium, which was the drug of choice back then for my condition. And I didn't believe it. I still thought it was just stress. But then the third time, I started taking lithium with encouragement from a very kind psychiatrist at the hospital. These were hospitals, the second 2 were in California. And my friends, dear friends, encouraged me to take lithium. They had talked to the psychiatrist and they were convinced I needed it. And everything was fine while I was on lithium. And I stayed on it for quite a few years.
Oh, okay. So there is medications that help people.
Yes, they no, not lithium now so much because I didn't have side effects. I was very fortunate that way, but there have been really bad side effects from lithium. So now the physicians are not prescribing it so routinely. They have other drugs and combinations of drugs, and it's really important to get on the right medication.
Yeah, and it's okay. Let's talk about medication for a second because I'm very confused about it. I'll tell you what my understanding is that there's no way to know until you try something. And there's no way to figure out what's the right thing until you maybe have to experiment with several of them. And the idea is that it works. Let's say you find the one, it'll work for X number of years, and then you're going to have to switch again at some point. Sometimes it's like 20 years. Do I have correct information, or is it really vary hugely between individuals? And how do they figure out even how this stuff works? It just seems so like experimental. Like the patient is a bit kind of a guinea pig in a sense. Like, here, try Prozac, try lithium, try Lexapro, try these different sort of names. I don't know what the chemical names are, but you hear them all the time. The popular names.
Yeah, I don't consider myself an expert on the current medications it's now called bipolar rather than manic depression. But I know that, people do succeed in getting the right combination or the right drug, and it does make a huge difference. And the people who are prescribing the drugs, I'm assuming that, like I worked after the Alcoholism Treatment Center, I actually was recruited to work on a psychiatric ward. So I spent about 4 years on the psychiatric ward at San Francisco General Hospital. And you see the same kind of situations over and over. So the physicians get used to knowing what's working and what isn't working. And yes, maybe different people may have allergies, for lack of a better word, or just for some reason the side effects affect some people and not other people. So there may be some experimentation going on with the goal of finding what works. And I believe that usually if you if you have a good physician and you stick with what they're recommending or advising, you'll get to the right kind of drug or medication that's going to be good for you.
And it's pretty much a lifetime kind of a thing. Is that correct?
Not always.
No? Okay, good. Okay,
not always. More people than most people realize do recover from severe mental illnesses. I happen to be one of them. I've been off the lithium for over 30 years. I haven't had to take anything else. I'm as normal or crazy as anybody else.
Yeah, well, exactly. Everybody's a little bit.
Yeah.
You get to know them.
We all have our moments, but I mean, if people look at me, they view me as a very stable person.
Well, sure, and certainly that was a severe kind of reaction that you were talking about. Sort of this religious ideation or something was going on with.
Oh yeah, we did. We had some of that. It was a long time ago, and it was. I'm somewhat desensitized now because I've written the book, The Bipolar Therapist, A Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning, which that's the subtitle, A Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning. And that implies that I had a pretty good outcome in the end. But writing the book was not so easy because it was almost like bringing up PTSD. A lot of what I went through, the worst part about it was the stigma. The colleagues that formerly respected me, some of them harassed me or just abusive, really. I was considered persona non grata, if I'm pronouncing it right, for some time. And the atmosphere at the Alcoholism Treatment Center, where I used to be respected and felt valued by just about everybody, became a toxic environment for me. And it was a blessing that I got recruited to work elsewhere, and a place where everybody was very professional and really honored me for the kind of work that I did there.
What a strange reaction to somebody having something like that. It's, to me, the undercurrent of that is absolute fear and terror. Like, if this can happen to one of us, it could happen to me. I don't want to be near that person because I don't want to catch it. It's irrational, of course. but it's almost like she's bringing us down in value by not being, above the fray of people with problems. It's really an unconscionable way to act with somebody who's got an illness. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, that's like saying somebody, a doctor who treats cancer can't do that anymore if he gets cancer. What the heck does that even mean? I mean, it makes no sense. But there is a stigma to mental health issues that somehow this person is like they're weak in some way. They're not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. They're not, really being honest with themselves. They could do better. It really, it's all bullshit, but nonetheless, people somehow think when somebody's got even anything really, but particularly mental health issues, that they could do something about it if they really wanted to.
I think your comment was very insightful about how when people see this happening to a colleague, unconsciously, they may be thinking, if it could happen to her, it could happen to me. And that would be why they would want to distance themselves and do whatever way they distance themselves and treat me with less respect than any human being deserves. And looking back on it, I felt like I had crossed a line, an invisible line. Back then, it was very much okay, almost fashionable for my colleagues and me. If you're a therapist, you should be in therapy. That was fine for people with their various neuroses. But becoming psychotic was crossing a line. That was not acceptable. It was frightening, as you said.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'm laughing because it's like neurotic, okay, psychotic, and not okay.
Right.
Yeah, you can be a regular screwed up person like we all are.
Right.
But if you're extra messed up in a way that we can't grasp or fix immediately, we don't want you around. What I'm liking about what you're saying is that you did have some very kind, intelligent, loving people in the therapy side that were helpful to you. I want you to talk about those people and then the healing part, because the hope of there's people that will probably feel very desperate out there and lost and scared.
They feel desperate, they feel lost, they feel alone. A lot of my motivation for writing The Bipolar Therapist was so that people would not feel so alone, and so that people would realize when people stigmatize, it shouldn't be their problem or my problem. It's the problem of the people that are afraid or uncomfortable with the idea of someone they know having a mental illness. Fortunately, I did have some very supportive friends, including two of my coworkers at the Alcoholism Treatment Center. So while all this feeling like I was being trashed at work, I had two friends that I would, at least one of them, have lunch with just about every day. And I also had a very dear friend, three friends and someone who was my boyfriend at the time, are all talked to the psychiatrist during my third hospitalization. And then after talking with him, they pleaded with me to start taking lithium, which I did. So I was blessed to have those friends in my corner. And one of those friends would call me just about every night to ask me how my day went when I was having this hard time at work. And she said something that I still remember. She said, there's free floating hostility in the air, and it lands on the person who's vulnerable.
You know who it also lands on? People that are kind. People that are incredibly kind, I think, get a lot of hostility because it's perceived by hostile people as vulnerability.
Or weakness. That's possible. It probably depends on how they express their kindness. Maybe if they're kind, but they're also taking care of themselves, and that may come through.
Boy, that is the biggest trick in life to me, is how do you remain kind and keep your boundaries really strong? It's a tricky little thing to navigate. It's another podcast episode probably. So, but we're going to,
that would be a good one.
But I like that. How do you go? I love you, but fuck off. That's a new t-shirt. I'm going to make that, Marcia. That's my new project. How did the healing start to happen? the lithium obviously was a big part of it. So we have some chemical help, and then we have obviously some therapeutic help.
I had a very good therapist, not the one that I thought I was going to marry. A very good therapist who was married and had 5 children. And I thought that would be good for me because I'm still married to his original wife, because a lot of my struggles in life, I think, during my early 20s and into my 30s probably, was the fact that my parents divorced when I was 13. And I probably, even though my father, blessed memory, was a good father, in some ways, in many ways, but he did leave us, and he remarried and had another child. It made me very conflicted about dating and thinking I wanted to get married, but probably afraid that it wasn't going to work out. So I think that might have been part of, whether it's genetic, how much is genetic and how much is environmental. I think that was a big part of an ongoing stress in my life, was this dysfunctional kind of dating pattern I had, where I would be attracted to the kind of men that didn't want a serious relationship and would push away the ones that did.
Yeah, well, those are all, I guess, survival tools, even though they don't really help you survive. But maybe emotionally they do. It's like, well, there's no risk of being left if you're going to pick somebody that's not going to commit anyway. So it's
right. It's like treading water.
Yeah. We all have little things in those areas. We're not going to get into mine, but
No, we don't have to. We all have our stuff.
Yeah. We're interesting creatures, us humans. With our biology that runs a lot of the show, and then the peculiar mental twists that we all have based on some genetic stuff and some, experience with childhood. Mostly, it seems that's a big part of things. These, a lot of this stuff that I talk about in the podcast comes down to what people believe. What are the belief systems that we adapt, or have like programmed into us by the family of origin, and that we think are real, but they're just beliefs. They may or may not be real. They're real to us because they feel real, but they let's put it this way: does it serve you for the better, or does it serve you for the worst?
Often it served us when we were younger because we had to, in order to function in that family system. And then as a therapist, what I often do, and I love being a therapist because a lot of it is helping people to learn how to get past early patterns that served them well when they were young, but no longer do, and help them move into the healthier ways of functioning and relating and gain intimacy and all the good things.
Yeah, see, what I like to look at that stuff as, yes, there's survival tools for the time. And rather than go, this is bad, this doesn't work for me, I've got to get rid of it, to actually approach it with, thank you for helping me to survive when there was no other tool, and I will no longer be requiring your services. And that's been helpful to me with certain things I've had to get rid of from my own.
Yeah, because you don't want to be judging yourself or blaming people. You want to know you did the best you could at the time with the tools that you had.
Sure. Yeah. And so it makes sense. I mean, I'm sure you ran into that a lot in the alcohol treatment, because people turn to that obviously for reasons of their survival tools, for dealing with situations that are otherwise feel probably on a visceral level as overwhelming, life-threatening, even though they're not. I can't take it. One more second, I got to get loaded. Or this is the only time I feel good, because there's an ongoing crappy feeling that I have as I move through the world. And the times I feel best are when I've taken the edge off. How many years of therapy and lithium before you went, I don't even need this lithium now? I feel so okay.
It wasn't exactly like I wasn't aware that I didn't need it. But I was on lithium well over 10 years, and it was great. I mean, I advanced in my career. I did well at my job at the hospital. I ended up becoming, as executive director of a family service agency. Got a clinical appointment at a teaching hospital, a clinical faculty appointment. So that's, and knowing that when I worked in the hospital, I would see, we called it a revolving door, that the patients would get well in the hospital on their medication, and then they get discharged and they don't like the side effects or some other reason they stop taking their medication, they come back in again. So it was we called it the revolving door syndrome. So seeing all of that kept me on my medication, helped me stay on it.
So at what point did you say, I'm going to dial back on this? I'm sure you didn't just cold turkey quit, because that would seem...
No, it was done in conjunction with the recommendation of my therapist, who was a psychiatrist and was prescribing and monitoring my lithium level.
Okay.
And I was watched very closely.
I would imagine, yes.
I was petrified to go off it.
I would be too.
It was a big surprise that nothing happened.
Yeah. I love hearing stories of people that have overcome challenges like that.
And I have a theory, like the psychology part of it, of why I didn't need it anymore, the medication. But I've explained that to, or somebody, I've had some people like advanced readers of my book, and one of my writing friends said she doesn't agree with my interpretation. So I think everybody might find their own interpretation or explanation of how come Marcia Naomi Berger never had to take lithium again. But because there's a lot of different material in the book about different parts of my life and my relationship with my mother and my relationship with various men in my life. So was it one thing? Was it another thing? Or, was it something about my job or my colleagues or the mentors that appear in the book over time in my life? People can have different reasons, and maybe my brain just changed. Who knows? Yeah,
who knows? I mean, you don't know. There's too many variables to figure out.
But the good news is that a lot more people get over a mental illness than is usually understood, and because the common wisdom, even among psychiatrists, most psychiatrists, I believe, would say that you never get cured, you never recover from bipolar disorder. The best that can happen is you learn how to manage it with therapy and medication.
Well, they don't make as much money if the other way is true.
Well, I don't want to think about it that way, but
the med visit.
I think most people are, which I believe about myself, are therapists, because we really love being in this kind of helpful, understanding, supportive, compassionate role. But I think that people may not be very candid who have recovered, because there's so much stigma that they don't want to even talk about having ever had it. I kept this a secret for a long, long time. I didn't tell my husband until I knew he was about to propose marriage, because I didn't want him to stereotype me before he really knew me as a whole person.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you did tell him, and that's responsible and ethical and all that. And to his credit, he went, "I love you, and we're going for it."
Very recently, I said to him something like, how come you still decided you wanted to marry me after I told you that I was taking lithium and I'd been hospitalized and all? And he said, well, what he said, I knew you over time, and so you had a condominium, and you were working and doing well, and so he saw me as a whole well enough put together person over some period of time that he trusted that it was going to work out. He said he never even asked anybody for their opinion.
Wow. How wonderful.
If it was me, I might have asked 100 people, oh, should I or should not? But he was confident in his judgment.
Well, sometimes love and good instincts override all that professionalism and questioning and all that stuff. Because one of the things in your title is meaning and love. So let's talk about those two things as the healing part, because I think those two things are really important for anyone to have something that means something to you, whether it's another person or your work or combinations of things that have meaning, and love. And it doesn't necessarily have to be love, romantic love, or anything like. It doesn't have to
Yes,
be
that's
that.
right.
But a life where you're connected with that feeling, where there's love in your life and there's meaning. I think those are the two biggest things. If you are walking around and you don't have that, you feel sad, you feel dead almost. It's very I really have a lot of ache for people that walk around like that. I mean, I don't go looking for it, or hey,
Yeah.
how you doing on the meaning and love parts? But I mean, I've had periods of times, when I was younger, where I felt like, what is the? Yeah, I mean, everyone questions that, certainly from teenage through 20s, like crazy. Like, what's the meaning of all this? And am I ever gonna? And usually, in terms of romantic love, am I ever gonna find romantic love that actually isn't just, a fling? That's really something with some depth. And there is a certain undercurrent of not complete emptiness, but like desperation to wonder. It's more like wonder. Is that ever going to happen for me? And will I be okay if it doesn't? In the way that maybe I perceive other people as having it.
Yeah, I think we human beings are wired to connect with other human beings, and whether you call it love or deep friendship or caring, to know that we're in relation to, in a meaningful way to others, as opposed to transactional. The love can be interpreted, again, different ways by readers, because they're the love of dear friends and the kind of ups and downs in my relationship with my parents, because love can mean so many different things, but not the wild flash of, crazy in love, but love meaning a deep kind of caring connection that we hope will accompany long-term committed relationships, and especially marriage. So these all kinds of love are in the Bipolar Therapist. I think my immediate thought about meaning was the meaning of my bipolar disorder. What was that all about? And as I say, it is subject to interpretation. We can all come up with our own. I certainly came up with my own, and I have it in the book, but I also say, I can't say that's it. Life is not a controlled experiment.
Yeah. And there's a certain amount of trust and comfort that you get from hearing somebody that's been through the thing that you're going through. There's just an automatic understanding, and I'm sure that comes through in the book, is that, oh, she's speaking from, I know, somebody who's going through that is going, oh, I know she gets this, because you wouldn't say it that way unless you had really experienced it. And that kind of trust you have from somebody. And I think that's why a lot of the 12-step programs work so well, because people they kind of nod their heads like, yeah, I know what that is.
And I describe my manic episodes, which were extremely embarrassing, when I look back on them and knowing that the people who saw them. I think that people can't help relating if they've been through something similar. It may come out, with variations in exactly what they did when they were having an episode, but they will relate to the incredible high feelings, and also the kind of the letdown when the way you're treated later. And not everybody is stigmatized so much. It depends, but in general, it's rough, and people do distance themselves from you.
Sure. Now, are you still working as a therapist, or are you just writing?
I am. Yeah, I still am a therapist. I see mainly with couples and individuals.
So when couples come in for couples therapy, are they usually on the same page of desire to have things work, or is somebody dragged in, kicking and screaming?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. I think they are usually on the same page. I give a questionnaire often before they come in. I give them a questionnaire, or when they first come in, and they ask, and it includes on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to contribute to making your relationship better? 1 to 10. and they typically are within either the same number, 10, 8, or in one case recently 5, both 5. So, okay, well, this couple, they're not really sure. They're probably kind of disheartened. But I think they've improved since coming to therapy. I think they're, as people learn to take more responsibility for their part in the equation of, whatever seems to be going wrong in the relationship, instead of just blaming their partner, and then they start changing how they behave and how they talk to each other, then things get better.
Well, it's an interesting thing with people in any type of conflict. This is a little off our topic for today, but I don't care because I love this stuff. I should probably do a marriage counseling episode with you too, because since that's what you do, I find that stuff really interesting, those long-term relationships. But the idea of a different perception of the same set of events or words that create these really big problems.
Well, it's a big job for the therapist. This is almost like work is he's trying to stay neutral and not take sides.
Well, that's really hard to do because I'm sure. Okay, and I'll just we don't have any names or couples here, but there are times I guarantee you go, this guy is an idiot, or she is so off the fucking mark, and I can't tell her because it's just too risky right now. And it's a hard balance to know when to tell somebody, because you could wreck the whole thing.
They get very mad at you if you kind of make them wrong in front of their partner.
Well, I had a friend of mine who was in therapy, and the therapist did take a stand on something with his now ex-wife, and the therapist said, "Well, what you just said is not true. And that's not what's going on. And let's take a look at," and she got up and walked out.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can only go so far if somebody doesn't want to. It's painful to change. Let's put it that way.
Well, we get used to our habits.
We've talked about so many wonderful things, but I want to plug your book for you, for people, because look, this is a problem. It's a mental health issue that people suffer from. We all know people that have had this. So let's talk about the book and any other ways people may want to contact you.
Okay, so the book is called Bipolar Therapist, A Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning. It's a memoir, my memoir, by Marcia Naomi Berger. So it's available just about anywhere where books are sold, online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Bookshop.org is very good for supporting independent bookstores, and if it's not in your library, you can ask them for it, or ask any bookstore for it if it isn't already there. And people want to get in touch with me, my website is marriagemeetings.com, as an S, Marriage Meetings. That's because my first book is called Marriage Meetings for Lasting Love. It's a self-help book for couples. Shows them how to have a weekly meeting that keeps the relationship great.
Folks, Marcia Berger has been here, and we have enjoyed, and we is just me, but I hope you've enjoyed it with me, our talk today, and her courage and the hope that lies within the pages of this book for people who are struggling with bipolar. So have a wonderful evening up in Northern California. Stay cool. We've got a new heat wave happening, apparently, so we're going to try to stay cool here in California. And you folks, wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me on it. It's been my pleasure.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There is a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Marcia Naomi Berger for being on the show. Please check out her new book, The Bipolar Therapist. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.